You are staring at two listings tonight, and both of them stop you cold. Two big cruising catamarans, both sold new for $1.2 million, both now sitting at a fraction of that. One of them looks like the deal of your life. The other one is a trap that will swallow your savings whole. And from the photos alone, you cannot tell which is which. Here is what I found after chasing this for months. The reason nobody will buy these boats has almost nothing to do with the asking price. It is a single hidden refit cost, buried below the waterline, that flips a $600,000 bargain into a $900,000 mistake before you ever leave the dock. I know because I climbed through 3 of these hulls with a flashlight and a moisture meter, and what I recorded in my notebook changed how I read every catamaran listing since. I want to show you the exact model year that separates the smart buy from the money pit, the one design detail the glossy brokers will never circle for you, and the survey figure that decided the whole thing for me. Whether this is your first cruising boat or you are trading up from a monohull to your first catamaran, this is the comparison nobody runs, honestly. So stay with me, because by the end you will know which of these two hulls to walk toward and which one to run from. Let me take you back to a marina on a gray morning last year, standing on a dock in front of one of these giants. A 50-something foot cruising catamaran, gleaming white, 3 cabins aside, a saloon bigger than my first apartment. The broker told me it was a steal. New, this boat crossed $1.2 million. The asking price that morning was $410,000. My first thought was the same one you are having right now. How is that not the best deal on the water? Then I opened the port engine locker. And the story the listing told and the story the boat told stopped matching. Let me explain why these boats collapsed in value in the first place. Because the collapse itself is the first clue. Through the 2000s and into the 2010s, the big French and South African yards built cruising catamarans at a scale nobody had ever seen. Lagoon, built by Construction Naval Bordeaux under the Beneteau Group, put out hull after hull, designed by the naval architects Van Petegem and Loriot Prévost, the same office that draws record-setting ocean racers. Fountaine Pajot built theirs on the west coast of France, and Robertson and Kane in Cape Town, South Africa, built the Leopard line and quietly built the charter versions for the moorings and sunsail fleets at the same time in the same sheds. That last detail matters more than anything a broker will tell you. A huge share of the big catamarans you are looking at tonight were never private yachts at all. They were charter boats. They spent 5, 6, 7 years in the Caribbean or the Mediterranean, rented out 50 weeks a year to strangers who paid nothing to own them and cared nothing for them. Then the charter company phased them out, sold them into the used market, and a broker wrapped a soft focus listing around them. So when you see that $1.2 million boat now priced at $400,000, understand what you are usually seeing. You are seeing a machine that did the hardest miles of its life, with an anchor windlass slammed by people who never paid for it, engines run cold and hard, sail drives soaked in salt water for a decade. The price did not collapse because the market is stupid. The price collapsed because the market finally learned to smell an ex-charter hull, and most first-time catamaran buyers still cannot. Here is the partial verdict on the value question, and it is the first thing to write down. A cheap big catamaran is not a bargain. It is a question. The question is always the same. What did it cost this boat to get this cheap? Because something did, and the thing that did the damage is almost never in the photographs. But cost of entry is the easy part. Anyone can compare two asking prices. The real investigation begins when you ask which of these hulls is actually going to hold together, and that is where two boats that look identical on the listing start to separate in ways that will cost you everything. Let me put the 3 big builders under the same cold light, because the internet will tell you they are all the same fiberglass box, and they are not. The difference lives in the structure, and the structure is where the frightening money hides. Start with the Lagoons, because they are the most common big cat on the used market, which means they are the ones you will be tempted by first. The 440 and later the 450 were enormously popular. Comfortable, roomy, easy to sail, short-handed. But go on to the owner's forums and read the refit logs, not the brochures, and one phrase keeps surfacing: bulkhead detachment. On some of these boats, the structural bulkheads, the internal walls that hold the shape of the hull and carry the loads from the rig and the bridge-deck, were bonded to the hull in a way that did not always hold up under years of flexing. Owners reported hairline cracks, tabbing, letting go, the interior joinery telling on the structure behind it. Not every boat, but enough that a smart surveyor now knows exactly where to press. Now, the reason this matters for your wallet, a bulkhead rebond or a structural repair on a 50-foot catamaran is not a weekend job. You are cutting into cabinetry, grinding back old fiberglass, retabbing, reglassing, and fairing it all back. I have seen those bills land between $40,000 and $90,000 once the yard opens it all up and finds the next thing. And here is the cruelty of it. That entire repair can be invisible in a listing. The photos show a bright, clean saloon. The damage is behind the veneer. Now put a Leopard next to it. The Robertson and Kane boats have a reputation for tougher construction, a heavier layup, built to take charter abuse in the sheds of Cape Town. That reputation is largely earned. But the ex-charter history cuts the other way. A privately owned Lagoon that sailed 400 hours a year is often a better buy than a Leopard that sailed 2,000 hours a year in a rental fleet, even if the Leopard was built stronger. Build quality and use history pull against each other, and the listing will hide both. And the Fountaine Pajots sit in the middle, often lighter and better sailing, but with their own soft spots around the sail drive housings and the forward crossbeam that carries the load of the head sail and the bowsprit. On some models, that forward beam is a known inspection point, because if it works loose, the whole rig geometry shifts. So which one wins on structure? My honest partial verdict is this: it is the wrong question. The winner is never the brand. The winner is the individual hull with the honest history and the clean structural survey, and the loser is any boat, any brand, where the seller cannot tell you who owned it and how it was used. A privately owned Lagoon beats a thrashed Leopard. A well-kept Leopard beats a tired Fountaine Pajot. Brand loyalty is exactly the emotion the listing wants you to feel, because it stops you asking the harder question. And the harder question is the one that lives underwater, in a part of the boat you cannot see from the dock and most surveyors barely mention. Because everything I have told you so far about structure can be fixed with money and time. What I am about to show you next is the failure that makes people give these boats away. Let me tell you what I found when I opened that engine locker on the gray morning, because it is the single most expensive lesson in the whole catamaran market. I looked down at the sail drives. A sail drive is the leg that carries the propeller down through the bottom of the hull straight out of the engine, instead of a traditional shaft angled out through the back. Nearly all of these big production cats use them, most commonly Yanmar units. They are smooth and efficient, and the builders love them because they are cheap and fast to install on a production line, and they hide a countdown clock that most buyers never hear ticking. Where the sail drive leg passes through the hull, there is a rubber diaphragm, a seal, that is the only thing between the ocean and the inside of your boat. Yanmar's own guidance calls for that diaphragm to be replaced roughly every 7 years. Not inspected, replaced, because it is rubber, sitting in salt water, being flexed and heated and cooled, and when it fails, it does not weep politely, it can let the sea in. Now stack that on top of a big catamaran with 2 engines, which means 2 sail drives, 2 diaphragms, 2 sets of seals and cones and anodes, and here is the part the listing will never, ever spell out. On a lot of these ex-charter boats, that 7-year service was skipped or done once and forgotten. So you buy a 15-year-old catamaran, and there are 2 aging rubber seals below the waterline that should have been replaced twice by now and never were. Replacing a sail drive, if it is corroded, is not a filter change. You have to haul the boat, sometimes drop the engine, cut and reseal the housing, and on the worst of them, the aluminum leg itself has suffered electrolysis and needs to come out entirely. I have watched that one job run from $12,000 to $30,000 per side, times 2 engines. That is a repair that can equal 1/5 of the entire asking price on a part you cannot see in a single photo. So let me make this practical, because I promised you things you can act on, not just things to fear. When you look at any big catamaran listing, you go straight to the service history and you ask one question in writing. When were the sail drive diaphragms last replaced? And do you have the invoice? If the answer is vague, if it is, I believe it was done, if it is the previous owner handled that, you treat that boat as if it needs 2 full sail drive services on day 1, and you subtract $30,000 to $50,000 from what you are willing to pay. That single question has saved me more money than any survey line item I know. Think about the position you are really in tonight. You are staring at 2 listings, and every honest number you need to tell the good haul from the money pit is scattered across places the brokers hope you never look. That is the whole reason I put everything into the Complete Sale Smart System, an instant download you keep forever. It hands you the real cost architecture of boat ownership that nobody posts online, a forensic financial comparison of Catamaran versus Monohull with no mythology, and the 6 blue water ready boats and exactly what they share. It is the same Investigator's checklist I used on that gray morning, laid out from your first question to your final decision. And here is something you can prove for yourself tonight for free. Take the sail drive question I just gave you and run it against any listing you have saved, then compare it to the claim that these are the only 3 volumes built on real cost numbers, not dealer optimism or forum folklore, across 406 pages of real content. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. And this matters right now, because the moment you subtract for those 2 overdue sail drive seals, you have already started reading the boat like an investigator instead of a dreamer. And this is where the villain of this whole story starts to show its face. Because somebody sold that ex-charter cat knowing those seals were overdue. Somebody wrote a listing that spent 3 paragraphs on the cockpit cushions and not 1 sentence on the drivetrain. Nobody lied outright. They simply ran a comparison that made the boat look like a bargain and left out the 1 column that would have flipped it. Now, I know a lot of you watching are not first-time buyers at all. You already own a cruising boat, maybe your first catamaran, and you are thinking this whole comparison is for the other guy, the one still shopping. I want you to stay with me right here, because this next part is for you specifically, and it is something you can check this week without a broker, without a haul out, and without spending $1. Go down to your own boat, open both engine compartments, and find where each sail drive passes through the hull. Look at the diaphragm, the rubber collar around the leg, from the inside. You are looking for cracking, for a glazed hard surface instead of soft flexible rubber, for weeping salt crust, for any powdery white corrosion on the aluminum leg itself. Then find your maintenance records and answer the same question I told the buyers to ask. When did I last replace that seal? If you cannot remember, it has been too long. And while you are down there, put a moisture reading or even just your hand along the lower edge of the main structural bulkhead where it meets the hull. Any softness, any hairline cracking in the tabbing, any gap opening in the joinery is telling you something the deck above will never show. You do not need a surveyor to start that conversation with your own boat. You need a flashlight and 1 honest hour. Most owners never spend it, and it is the reason so many of these cats reach the market as disasters instead of as the well-kept exceptions that actually hold their value. Because here is the thing that ties the buyer and the owner together. The boat you are shopping for and the boat you already own are the same boat at different points on the same curve. The buyer is trying to spot the neglect. The owner is trying not to become it. And the neglect that destroys these boats is almost always the invisible, below the waterline, deferred kind, not the scratched gel coat kind you can see. But sail drives and bulkheads can both be fixed at a price. There is one more system on these boats where age alone, not abuse, quietly makes them uninsurable and unsellable, and it is the reason some of these $1.2 million cats will never find a buyer at any price. Let me talk about the rigging and the age, because this is where the market turns cold in a way that catches even experienced buyers off guard. The mast on one of these big catamarans is enormous, and the standing rigging, the stainless steel wire and fittings that hold it up, has a working life. Most riggers and most insurers now treat somewhere around 10 to 15 years as the point where that rigging should be replaced, whether it looks fine or not, because stainless fails from the inside at the swage fittings where you cannot see it. On a boat this size, Re-rigging the whole standing rig can run from $25,000 to $60,000 once you add the labor and the crane and the yard time. Now here is where it stops being just a repair bill and becomes an existential problem for the boat. Insurance companies have gotten strict. On an older catamaran, more and more underwriters will simply refuse to write a policy or will demand a full survey plus proof of new rigging and service sale drives before they quote a number you can afford. And if you cannot insure it, you often cannot keep it in a marina, and you certainly cannot finance it. So the boat becomes a thing that only a cash buyer with his own yard can even own. That is what nobody will buy them really means. It is not that the boats are worthless. It is that the pool of people who can legally and financially take one on has shrunk to almost nothing. Let me put a real number on the trap so you feel the whole shape of it. Take that $410,000 catamaran from the gray morning, add 2 sail drive services that were skipped, call it $40,000, add a bulkhead rebond, a survey uncovered, call it $50,000. Add standing rigging that is 14 years old and must be replaced before anyone will insure it, call it $45,000. Add the haul out, the yard time, the bottom job, the anti-fouling, the anodes, the 10 small things a yard always finds, call it another $30,000. You walked in thinking you were spending $410,000. You are actually spending well over $575,000, and you have not yet slept a single night aboard. That is the math the listing hoped you would never do, and that is the trap that reshuffles the whole ranking. Because a slightly more expensive boat with fresh rigging, new sail drive seals, and a private owner who kept every invoice is not more expensive at all. It is dramatically cheaper. The cheap boat is the expensive one. Every single time, the whole used catamaran market is priced backward from the truth, and the brokers are not going to be the ones to turn it right side up for you. So which boat do I actually walk toward? Which of the 2 listings you open tonight survives all of this scrutiny? I told you at the start I would give you the one detail that decided it for me, the thing no comparison ever puts in front of you. Here it is. It comes down to the model year and the bridge deck. Let me explain both, because together they are the closest thing to a crystal ball this market has. First, the bridge deck. That is the underside of the boat, the platform that spans between the 2 hulls, the floor of the saloon seen from below the water. The vertical distance between the water and that platform is called bridge deck clearance, and it is the single most important number on a cruising catamaran that almost no listing states. When that clearance is shelved to the length of the boat, every wave that rolls under the boat slams up against that flat surface. It is called bridge deck slamming, and offshore it is brutal. It is a bang like a car crash under your bed, hour after hour, and it does 2 things. It exhausts the crew until they hate the boat and sell it, and over years it hammers the structure, working at exactly those bulkhead bonds and crossbeam joints I told you to inspect. Here is the buried rule of thumb that the naval architects know and the brokers never repeat. On a well-designed cruising catamaran, the bridge deck clearance should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6% of the overall length. Fall much below that, and you have bought a boat that punishes you offshore and quietly damages itself. Certain popular models, especially the ones the yards stretch to cram in more cabins for the charter trade, sit on the wrong side of that line. They added a whole extra step of accommodation and stole it from the clearance. Those are the boats that slam. Those are the boats the experienced owners quietly offload, and those are a big share of the ones nobody will buy now, though the listing will only ever tell you how many people sleep aboard, never how the boat behaves at sea. Now the model year, and this is the part that feels like buried treasure once you know it. On several of these production lines, the yards quietly revised the structural details partway through the production run, precisely because the early boats revealed the weaknesses. Bulkhead bonding methods changed. Crossbeam reinforcement changed. Sail drive housings were improved. The early hulls of a given model, the first 2 or 3 years of production, are frequently the ones carrying the original sins, and the later hulls of the same model name got the fixes. 2 boats can wear the same model badge, the same brochure, the same profile, and be structurally different boats because one was built before the revision and one after. So the finale verdict, the thing I want you to carry into every listing from tonight forward, is this. Do not shop by model name, shop by hull number and build year. Find out where in the production run your specific hull falls. Ask whether it is an early or a late boat of that model. Cross that against the bridge deck clearance for that design, and weigh both against the ownership history, private versus charter. When I did exactly that with the two listings that started all of this, the cheaper boat, the $410,000 steel, turned out to be an early charter hull with the low bridge deck and the original bulkhead detail and two overdue sail drives. The more expensive listing, the one I almost scrolled past, was a late-run private hull with a revised structure, fresh rigging, and every invoice in a folder. The expensive one was worth $200,000 more than the cheap one, and it was priced only $60,000 higher. That is the comparison the brokers will never run for you, because running it honestly kills half their inventory. The honest comparison always existed. The naval architects knew the clearance numbers, the yards knew which year they changed the bulkheads, the service records knew when the seals were last touched. Every piece of the truth was preserved somewhere, in a design spec, in a class note, in a maintenance folder. It was simply scattered across places the average buyer never looks, and wrapped in listings written to keep it scattered. Now you hold it in one piece. So the next time you open two catamaran listings and one of them looks too cheap to be true, you will not feel that flush of excitement anymore. You will feel the question, what did it cost this boat to get this cheap? And you will know exactly where to look for the answer. In the hull number, in the bridge deck, in the sail drives, in the rigging date, in the difference between an owner who paid for the boat and a fleet that never did. That is the edge. That is the thing that keeps your savings out of the wrong hull. You are not the buyer who wants to be sold a dream. If you were, you would have taken the broker's word on that gray morning and written the check. You are the buyer who wants the cold verdict before the money is gone, the one who would rather hear the ugly number now than discover it after the haul out. That is exactly who I make these for. So tell me where you are in this. Drop a comment and name the two boats on your short list right now, the exact models and years you are weighing against each other, and tell me where you are watching from. If you give me the model and the build year, I can often tell you which side of that structural revision it falls on, and whether that bridge deck is going to slam you awake at 3 in the morning. I read those comments, and this is the audience that actually helps each other buy smart, so do not sit on the sidelines. Name your contenders, and if you want the honest comparison instead of the sales pitch, stay with this group, because the next investigation I am finishing is one that is going to make a lot of people angry. It is about the one budget cruising monohull that surveyors quietly rank as the safest ocean boat under 40 feet, a boat still selling for well under $100,000, while the market chases shinier hulls that will never cross an ocean the way this one already has. There is a hull number range on that boat that matters just as much as the one you learned tonight, and I am going to hand it to you the same way. Do not miss it. Because the wrong boat cost you a decade in your savings, the right one costs you a weekend of hard questions. I would rather you spend the weekend. Now go open those two listings again, and this time, read them like an investigator. Before you go, one thing. This video gave you the overview, but inside the cruising compass, I take you through the full hull-by-hull inspection right where we just left off. You can ask me your own question and I answer you myself, not some robot. You belong in here with us. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen and you can cancel anytime with one click. I'm Marcus. Come join me. Now, if you're wondering why these dealers simply can't move their stock, no matter how low the price drops, that's the real story worth understanding. I'll walk you through it honestly right here. Let's take a look together.